and welcome. This evening, I'm calling now for any public comment on any items not currently listed on the agenda. And seeing none, we'll move forward. To this evening, we have a legislative hearing, L0801, and this is regarding Oregon City Code Amendments 6-month update. And at this time, before we take this to staff, I understand we have someone in the audience that would like to speak. Please come forward and give us your name, if you would, and your city residence. Let me get you at the... There you go. We want to get you on tape. Okay. You want to give that to staff, and then they can check that out.
Okay. Does that work okay?
Oh, we're picking them up, all right? Yeah. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. Son-in-law of one of the people who has property involved in this, Levon Kent. Speak on her behalf and also. Be brief with this.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do I push a button or?
Okay. Now we got you. So you don't have to go. Do we need to go through all that again? His name and address? Okay, we got you. So let's just go ahead.
So anyway, the map and what I'm here to speak about is in support of a letter sent to the planning department in December by Levon Kent and Dennis Klink, basically asking for consideration to look at changing their property zoning from R2 to C for commercial. And in the map I just handed out, that's shown in black, kind of in the bottom right of the picture. Basically, just briefly, I think everybody's familiar with the area, the intersection of Highway 213 and Myers Road, with Clackamas Community College on the east side and Hagen, Starbucks, Carl's Jr., and that stuff on the north side of Myers Road, and these residential properties on the south side of it. Basically, the reason for the request to consider maybe a switch from R2 to commercial zoning, time was when I first saw this property, this road out in front was a sleepy little 2-lane highway out in the country. Now it's a state highway, has noise that's pretty comparable to a freeway most hours of the day. And Myers Road, which cuts through now and makes that an intersection, wasn't there before. So this particular corner is pretty intense traffic. And I guess I say we, but the landowners see the traffic as being a real negative for residential, whether it's a single-family home, which it currently is, or multifamily homes, just because of the noise and the activity around the intersection. The thought is most people would prefer to actually be able to sleep at night rather than hearing the noise all night long. But the busy traffic in the intersection, although negative for residential, seems like it's tailor-made for commercial. In fact, the other side of the street is commercial now, where the high traffic would be considered desirable. And what we were looking at, these two properties, if they were squared off to Myers Road, amounts to about 1.5 acres of property. But as you can see from the map, it also includes a third party's property, Mr. Kreisig, who owns the actual frontage on Myers Road. His representatives have talked to both Mrs. Kent and Mr. Klink in the past about actually a possibility of buying their properties and looking at trying to do a development in there more along the lines of commercial. So I think everybody's fairly confident that he would be agreeable to that if the city thought it bared more merit. So the thought is, if this corner, and it'd be up to the planning department to determine how much of that would be commercial, if they would consider that, it seems like it's a more ideal use for that intersection. The going to the southeast or to the bottom of that map I handed out, that's already R2 apartments in there, and there's a access road that goes around behind the properties. So that's pretty much a well-defined area where there isn't going to be any commercial creep past that. But then going to the west on Myers Road, there is more property available if the city wanted it for commercial. If they wanted to keep it at R2, that would also be fine. No issues there. So I know that there isn't going to be any decision tonight on this, and I basically just wanted to bring that up and let people know that the landowners feel like it's an ideal spot for commercial, consistent with what's there, more than the R2. So, thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks for bringing to our attention.
Okay. Okay, thank you, sir.
We wanted to add his exhibit as Exhibit E into the record.
Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. And I guess we'll go now to staff. And is that Christine?
All right, thank you, Chair Powell. And planning staff will get back to the Planning Commission on this public comment at the next meeting. There, as you can imagine, are definite issues we'll need to bring up, and you should get a good detailed review on that in the next memo. Tonight's our third meeting on the L0801 6-month update. Real briefly for the people in the audience that are listening and on streaming video and cable, the City Commission adopted L0801, which was code changes this last summer, but built into the ordinance was a kind of a mandatory 6-month review, just making sure if anything was missing or after approval, if things needed to be massaged. And we started that process in November, had 2 meetings, one in November, one in December. Planning Commission is meeting again tonight. We anticipate one more meeting at the second meeting in January on the 25th, and then hopefully we can come to you the first meeting in February with a full packet. And then that would be forwarded on to the City Commission for their subsequent meetings. I brought it up at the last meeting, but I want to again remind you that there's a tentative work session on February 9th with the City Commission. And that would be here at their work session, but it'd be a joint one with the Planning Commission and City Commission to go over these code amendments.
And that's what time?
Well, the work sessions usually start at 5:30, and we'll try to get you first on the agenda, and we'll have better confirmation as we get closer. I also want to let the Planning Commission know that we have a new 6-month code update webpage on our Planning Division page of our website. And so if you want to see the record so far, we'll be adding tonight's information to the webpage tomorrow. You'll be able to get access to all the codes that have been proposed for revision. All you need to do is go to, under the main city webpage, under departments, find planning. And once you're on the planning page, it should be the second article down on the main page, and that will bring you to the L0801 6-month update project page. And so we're hoping to keep that for the public as a way to get kind of a full document of what's happening. Tonight we don't have many code amendments, and I'll try to be brief on things that are really just reorganization and readability issues, and a little more in depth in issues that have a little more meat to them. So please, as we go through the memo and the code, if you have questions, please ask them, and then if you feel that we're going too far into something that is self-explanatory, let us know too, because we don't want to get bogged down on the details for that. First up in the proposed amendment is Exhibit A, and this is a really simple addition we made. 1750, which regulates land use processes, administration procedures, had the requirement for a neighborhood association meeting kind of hidden in, and it was always really hard to direct applicants and the public to it. So we really just made an effort of taking the exact same code and making a new subsection and a new number. So that's what you see out of this Exhibit A, is no wording has changed. It's just been pulled out from under a previous header, so it kind of can stand on its own. So.
I'm reading through the pre-app notes there, the red lines, and I'm wondering if we should have a requirement where the minutes of the meeting, the neighborhood meeting, are actually a part of the record.
Are you looking under A, under Neighborhood Association meeting?
Yeah.
You know, let me check. I thought we did have that, so let me see
It
if
says if the applicant holds their own meeting, a copy of
Right.
the certified letter. So there's the certified
Yeah.
letter part that there was a meeting, but there's nothing about
And so,
minutes.
and generally what we
meeting.
accept, that's good to put in code, generally what we accept is a sign-in sheet of who attended, and then briefly the applicant kind of overviews what happened. And then we put that's in the record. So if a neighbor looked at it and said, well, that's not what happened, they'd have the ability to review that as part of it.
Yeah, because I don't know if we've ever seen in our package of anything that we've had that needed a neighborhood meeting, the actual minutes of any meetings. We've heard the content of the meeting. Yeah, the content of the
Well, and
meeting.
sometimes it may be
Wasn't
hard to get minutes, the actual, like if it's a neighborhood association, it may be hard to get the actual minutes because they're on a different time schedule than we are. But what we could get, well, we can get the minutes in regards to if it was a separate meeting. And then what we've generally done with, and we can figure out how we want to write code for this, for the neighborhood association, is we generally get it in the form of a letter from the land use committee that said, we met with developer A on this date. These are our issues. Thank you very much, neighborhood association. And that's generally what we put in the file for the neighborhood association, because we know that the process to create minutes, sometimes you can't get it in time.
And that's fine, and I think maybe we should have both, is that, to make sure everybody's on the same page, because usually what somebody does is brings up, oh, I don't think it should look like this, it should look like that. The developer, the applicant may be disagreeing the whole time and sort of saying, okay, I'll take that under advisement or whatever.
I think we have seen minutes before, but they've usually been written by the applicant.
They've been written, especially when when they are their own meeting. They've been written by the applicant, because that's all you can do when it's your own meeting. But for the neighborhood association, knowing that it's probably going to be the land use chair writing the letter or the email back to me, I mean, what things do you want to see in there to be codified? So the point is, once it's codified, if they don't put it in there, then that's another problem. If we are too specific, then, if I'm a developer A, I meet with this neighborhood association, they send a letter, and the neighborhood association missed something from our submittal criteria, the developer has to go back to the neighborhood association, or I do, in completeness, and say, oh, you missed this piece of the code, can you go back? So, I want to make sure that it's specific, but not so overburdened specific that if something's missed, the the submittal process gets delayed because it's some inadvertently missed by the land use chair when they wrote their email or letter.
One of the questions I have involved in this is it talks about the CIC, but there's quite a few neighborhood associations that are no longer involved or no longer active. And I know that there's been some history of neighborhood associations, or these guys not being able to contact somebody. And it seemed to me that we had set it up that it went to the CIC if there was not a neighborhood association available. That's still how it is, but that's not what I read.
Okay.
So can we, clear that up a little bit in there? Because I think if there's not a neighborhood association land use person available for that neighborhood, or if they're not active, then I think
Not responding.
or not responding,
Yeah.
it should go to the CIC.
And you want to get also additionally a little more direction on what we expect back from either the neighborhood association or the applicant.
and/or the applicant, whatever you think you need, actually. But just, I think it would be good to have both. That the applicant, sort of states what they understood, what they presented in the meeting, how they understood the information being received, as well as the neighborhood groups, if it's from the chair, the land use chair, whoever it is, because we may start seeing already discrepancies right there, right from the get-go, even before it got to us. Yeah, even before it gets to us, we can see that way back then there was some issues.
Okay, I think that's easy to revise. So feedback, and then I think the sign-in sheet, no matter what the meeting is, very important. Yeah, we can get those revisions to you next week. I'm going to hand this over to Pete for the natural resource overlay. Half of this bulleted section are tweaks, and the other half are a little more specific. So Pete will take you through that.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Last meeting, we had discussed some of the changes to the Natural Resources Overlay District, so I'm only going to talk about the sections in your packet that are highlighted in yellow, and of those, only the ones that are very substantive. One of the major items on the first page of 1749 is clarification of how the map is referenced as, and what we're doing there is explaining to applicants that they have a choice of accepting the Natural Resource Overlay District map as it is delineated on the city's map, which is a buffer that is 10 feet beyond the vegetative corridors that are defined from the streams. Or, and this will be the case in larger land use application, or they will verify and delineate the true location of the Natural Resource Overlay District and the features that are in it as part of their land use application. So if you're just putting a shed on your property and you don't want to have to go through the Natural Resource Overlay District process and you're willing to accept the city map, that's what you would do. You would have no further review as long as you locate outside the district. But in most cases, for larger applications, you will be delineating or verifying the location. So we have a verification process in the code here, as well as the delineation process. So that's just explaining that.
Okay, so that's type 1, it says. The applicant may choose either one, type 1 or type
2.
Type 2. So really is larger applications are not going to be a type 1.
No, they're not.
And
And the type 1 process is something akin to what we call a staff exemption, which is a clear and objective process in here. If we cannot verify via type 1, then the applicant will have to submit a report that basically shows that they're not impacting that corridor and delineating that corridor accordingly.
they no longer have a choice.
No.
At that point, that's when you make the determination.
Right, if we can't accept the type 1 review,
Yeah,
they'll
that's
be
back
going to
on the
type 2.
applicant. Yeah.
Okay. Verifiable delineation. Okay, well, I just want to make sure that was real clear. When I first read it, wasn't clear to me. It sounded like they could go either way, and now that you've explained it and I've reread that, it makes more sense.
In some situations, we may approve a type 1. Let's say it's just getting, you're getting your contours and you're just figuring out the specific slope to figure out where top of bank is, and you hire a wetlands biologist surveyor, and we get the report, and it's really obvious, and there's no wetlands, and that's the stream. That's kind of a type 1. But if it's if someone's making the argument that, let's say, wetlands have been removed, are no longer there, or something like that, that most likely would be a type 2 review, because on a staff level, that's not a clear and objective.
And, yeah, type 2 offers opportunity for the public to comment, as well as referrals to Department of State Lands and DEQ, Corps of Engineers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we need to say anything about, we use this term, provide a verifiable delineation. Do we need to state who that needs to be a certified biologist or what?
That's spelled out in the application requirements,
Okay.
certified.
I just wanted to make sure it was covered someplace.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's later in the code.
Yeah, we had that same conversation, and we ended up copying ourselves twice, so we went back to what the previous requirements were.
Okay.
So what, if they do go out and they come back with a better map, or a map that's more qualified or better delineated, I mean, at that point, do we take that map and then change our map? Or is it?
As yet, we don't have the technical capability to change the map on the fly. You know, the map is the adopted map, and we'll have a log or record of all of these delineations the way we used to, where you would need basically have to check the record to see where the actual line is. As we update our mapping capabilities, hopefully we can start incorporating some of these changes into our actual online GIS map. And we'll probably need to change the code when we start doing that, because right now the City Commission is the only approving body for the adopted map.
That's why I asked.
Yeah, that gets a little bit legal when you start amending. We're not, a land use decision for a delineation of a resource is not intended to revise the adopted NROD map.
I mean, it just makes sense that we keep that record, and then when we go through our comp plan revision or whatever, you know, that would draw this back into it, they'd be able to make
We have much
corrections.
better technology today than we had in 1999
Oh, yeah,
when this was
absolutely.
adopted. So.
And it gets better.
I think that was mine. Okay.
Like, I was yelling. Anyway, the technology is better every day, and we might as well take advantage of it. But on the other hand, I just wondered the legalities. When I
Yeah.
read the next point, that was why I questioned it.
Because in a sense that you're changing it as an overlay zone, and that is in a sense a type 4 process.
That's correct, yeah. Let's see, the next bullet that I'm talking about is new utility lines. There's a separate set of standards for new utility lines. And it requires that new utility lines be placed in the right-of-way. And engineering staff, Nancy Krashauer, has expressed some concern about this because of the potential cost of locating new utility lines in the right-of-way when there's a more direct route potentially over or under a natural resource. And in the case of the Caulfield Estates subdivision that was recently before you, it was a 4-lot subdivision and zone change. One of the concerns that came up in the City Commission was the design of the pipe, sewer pipe, I believe, that went over. And so what we have written to date is that if it is deemed infeasible to place, new utility line in the right-of-way, then there is an alternative. I think what we'd like to discuss or want the Planning Commission's feedback from is, are there any additional process, any additional standards that for utility lines that should be considered in this event? Since how much cost burden is considered infeasible before we start putting the utility lines over or under the Natural Resource Overlay District, and what mitigation, if any, needs to be in place. And so if you have any feedback about that as we go forward, I'd be happy to talk about that.
Well, I guess that's the question, is what is feasible? I mean,
Yeah.
how do we define feasible?
Yeah, I mean, we can look at it a couple different ways. One, we can look at it in proportionality, the whole legal aspect of planning of, are we burdening the applicant on a design solution that's just absolutely not proportional to the amount of lots that they're doing, and is that legal for us to do that? When we have a design solution that may not be as aesthetically pleasing, but maybe with mitigation could fit into that proportionality aspect. And I know on, the engineering division in Public Works, because of Oregon City's topography, there are times when you may need to put especially a sewer line or a pump station outside the right-of-way. And in this situation, Caulfield, it actually went over the water resource. And, it wasn't very aesthetic, but it was deemed the most feasible answer for the 4-lot subdivision. There's one thing to look at is, do you require first to show that it can't be tunneled or buried under the water resource? And do, in that aspect, can you, the kind of that alternatives analysis of here are all the different things that you could potentially do and show us why you can't do that. But I think, we have two competing issues. One is the feasibility and proportionality. The other is aesthetics of, sewer pipe that's going over stream that's not the most aesthetically pleasing. So how do you write code to make sure that if that actually does happen, that they've proven themselves and gone through all the alternatives to show that that really is the only option? And secondly, is there an additional process, or, is that maybe a type 3 process that they have to go through for that? Or can you write code to get them through that process through a type 2 process? And so that's what the City Commission brought up as a potential issue, and I think they want the Planning Commission's input, and I think we definitely, as staff, want your input on that.
I think with Caulfield, and this is really one of the few times I can remember where we've had a sewer line put across a creek. And just to give you a refresher memory, Caulfield came in with 125 lot subdivision, and then they came back in and added those 4 lots at a later date, and then this sewer line came into issue. And the question was, do you put a brand new pump station in Caulfield subdivision when there's an existing pump station across the creek about 100 yards away? Talking $400,000 to $500,000, $300,000 to $500,000 for a pump station, plus the long-term maintenance, plus running that pipe from Caulfield down Caulfield up to 213, versus gravity feeding all of the sanitary to an existing pump station on the other side of the creek, have the applicant upsize that existing and improve that existing pump station and utilize it to serve the whole basin. So while there's also the aesthetic component, there's the cost-benefit analysis of it. I mean, the long-term maintenance of pump stations in the city, it's not our goal to go put pump stations in everywhere. So if you can better utilize it. And so that gets difficult to try and codify as a type 2 decision, and that may be why, utilities crossing streams outside of the right-of-way should be a conditional use maybe. And then at least it comes in front of the Planning Commission, and then you can start to look at, is there, maybe the, part of the application requirement is that you provide the preferred route, the alternative route, the costs of those, and then you do start looking at, you got Dolan issues, proportionality issues, and so, I think that might start to address it, and then it gets into a bigger question. If we are going to put a pipe across a creek, is there something we should be doing for that? Is it additional mitigation off-site? Are we trying to screen these things? So I think there's probably lots of options, but we really would have a concern of just saying, you can't ever do it. It's just, I don't think that's a position you would want not only developer but the city in, if we have to go in and put a sewer line in somewhere or a water line. The water lines tend to be a little bit easier because they're pressurized. It's the sewer lines where you're trying to gravity feed them, which keeps the cost down.
What's the legal ramifications? On proportionality, are we going to be, if we use that as a defining term, is that going to be something that we're going to be in court half the time? Proportionality, or saying that, well, it's only four houses, so 4 lots, so we're not going to make you, or we're going to make you build a new pump station. That's crazy.
For 4 lots, we get to deal with an eyesore, which is a pipe across the creek. We can look at it both ways, I think.
Yeah, and I guess, sorry, me. I guess my thought with that is then let's have it be conditional. Yeah.
Conditional use.
Conditional use.
And I like Tony's ideas of having the applicant come back with the preferred alternative and 1 or 2 other alternatives.
In that case, you would have been able to see, the proposal to gravity feed the basin across the creek, upgrade the existing pump station, the costs associated with that, and then, building a new pump station, and then all the pipe that would be laid to get out of Caulfield, down Caulfield to 213, tie into the lines down there. At least then we would have been able to see both designs and both options and what the benefits are and what the negatives are.
Proportionality will always apply. So you don't need to write it in. It always is out there as an umbrella concept that will apply to every exaction or obligation that a government imposes in order to serve a development, no matter what. In your Caulfield scenario, though, I don't remember the specific facts of that case, but if that was the only way to serve this particular facility, it would be proportional. Because that's the only way they can get service. Right? It doesn't matter that it costs $1 million, because that's the only way they can get service, and they can't build without service.
Mitigation is different from that, is that true? I mean, you have basically an eyesore, a pipe going across a creek in a natural area. And it seems like there could be some mitigation for granting that type of...
Right, but your mitigation is going to have to be proportional to your impacts too, right? You can't require somebody to replant a field out here if your eyesore is over here, right? You have to, everything has to be proportional to the impacts from this development. So if you have a pipe that has to go here, your landscaping has to be proportional to what's necessary to buffer that pipe.
That pipe could become an access way to connect this neighborhood to the other neighborhood.
And then the other neighborhood could help pay for it because they also share the benefit of it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be,
that helps.
that you should bring, it should come back as,
And that's what we were leaning towards, but we wanted to get your feedback.
because it just makes sense. If we're going to look at that, I mean, we need to look at all sizes of it, all sides of it before we make a decision. It would make sense to me.
Do you see a differentiation between if they were able to tunnel under the resource and bore, therefore the aesthetic wouldn't be there, but they'd be outside the right-of-way? Do you see that as different compared to for a Type 2 or a Type 3 decision? Or is it because it's above ground and it becomes an eyesore, then it becomes the Type 3? So that's another question, too.
It'd be how impactful it was to the resource. I mean, if you're going to tunnel down and, then I think,
Counterproductive.
yeah. So I think that would be same. I think we'd have to see that.
I agree. I think it's the same. What you really can't measure when you go underground is what the long-term maintenance impacts.
Right.
More unpredictable.
Okay. That's good, because I didn't know, understanding is this an aesthetic issue, is this a natural resource issue, is, what specifically is the issue of having the pipe over the creek? And I mean, I agree with that, but I wanted to get your input on that.
Thoughts on that before we move on? All right.
Okay, in the last meeting, we discussed how we are, standards for subdivisions and partitions within the Natural Resource Overlay District. And what we've added into the transfer density part of the code is a table that specifies what the permissible reductions to lot size, lot depth, and lot width are for land divisions that are requesting a transfer of density. And if you check on that page, we don't have the page numbering, but it's section 1749-240. Page 15 in your packet? Good. Okay. And what that section says is, in order to allow for a transfer of density pursuant to the section above, the dimensional standards of the base zone may be modified in order to minimize disturbance to the Natural Resource Overlay District. The permissible reduction is specified in table 1749-240 sub C, and for each zone, each single-family residential zone, or each residential zone is specified in the column. And so R10 can go down to half the lot size, would be a 5,000 square foot lot, and the smaller districts get a slightly smaller percentage reduction for lot size. And then the minimum lot width is specified in there. This is the same table that is from the tree protection part of the code. So it just helps clarify how the density transfer provisions work. And are there any questions about that?
I don't know. Any?
And the remainder of the revisions to the Natural Resource Overlay District are primarily just the ones we talked about at the last hearing, and clarification of mitigation plantings, clarifications of exempt uses, and renumbering of the sections.
All right. The next chapter is 1752 off-street parking and loading. This is Exhibit C in your packet. And a lot like 1749, some of these changes are really just reorganization. And sometimes it's hard to see from your packet because you see a whole big thing X'd out. It was moved. But for a long time, our off-street parking and loading, I think over the last 10 to 15 years, things just kind of got added. And we finally just realized we needed to reread this to make it more readable. And there was a lot of excess that was, sometimes it was worded a second time that didn't need to be, and so we consolidated a lot of things. Some charts didn't just, or some lists just didn't make any sense, so we could reduce it to a full sentence, so we did that. But there's two big things I wanted to bring up. One, which is, we had alternative landscape now and alternative parking plans. We've separated them out because they were kind of mushed together. And so you start with an alternative landscaping plan. So let's say you have a small lot or you're using really innovative low impact development landscaping, and just the way your site sits, you just can't get that exact 5-foot wide buffer planter strip because the way your swale works, it just won't quite get it. So you have an alternate landscape plan process. But the burden of proof is you still have to show why, on balance, your landscaping plan meets or exceeds the existing standards. But it allows for those, working around existing conditions and topography, and how do we get the site and stormwater to flow. So, and potentially even save trees. So that's the alternative landscaping plan. The second is an alternative parking plan, and that deals with dimensions of parking stalls, drive islands, and those issues. So if you have a really, really small infill parking lot, and you're only maybe parking 6 to 8 spaces, you may not need the traditional 24 wide drive aisle width that you would in a very, very big parking lot. And because maybe everybody that's parking there is employee parking, and that's not a lot of customer parking, and you have adequate backup width. There's a way for you to get reduction to that standard through your alternative landscape plan, but we can only approve it if we find that it is safe. And so generally we would refer to our contract transportation engineer to look at those dimensions, and if he felt that it could not be met, then we would deny it. Or if he felt it could be met if something happened. Or he may say, I'm not quite convinced, tell the applicant to go turn in some more information from their transportation engineer. So it's a way for us to look at tweaks, especially for small lot infill, or to deal with compact spaces. So I know we've had that in some situations where you only had so much, and 24 feet didn't quite get you a full parking lot, but if your drive aisle was 23 feet, everything worked out. And at the end of the day, a 23-foot backing up distance didn't dramatically change the parking lot since it wasn't that big. So that's some of the ways to really help infill development and get the parking that needs to happen in infill development. Second is the change in use status for downtown, and I wanted to highlight this. Currently, we have some gray area when you have an existing, like you have an existing tenant who's today office, and we want to have a new commercial tenant that moves in. We want to make sure that it's explicitly said in the code that if this is a building between 5th and 10th in the downtown design overlay, that you will not be triggered for additional parking. Some spaces don't have any parking, and if Main Street wants to work on bringing more ground floor retail, especially for the revitalization, we need to honor that by not putting additional burdens. If someone's looking at leasing a space and they read the code and it says, well, technically you may need to find 2 or 3 more parking spaces. You know, there's a way to find maybe 2 or 3 more parking spaces within 1,000 feet or parking sharing, but at the end of the day, I think we're trying to say is that design overlay district, if you're working with existing buildings and existing tenant spaces, we're not going to trigger additional parking if you are changing use. But if you're making an addition or you're building a new building, you will be triggered for a parking review.
What if you have let's say the bank building that's currently currently office, and the determination is made to make it lofts and apartments or something along those lines? I mean, you're currently, maybe you have 4 offices, 5 offices, 6 offices, and you probably have 8 spaces that are required. And you get it into something like that, and plus retail on the main floor. I mean, are we going to, my question is this, if we don't have some look at that, in a change of use, are we going to end up getting ourselves into more trouble with lack of parking downtown than we currently are?
Good question. In a perfect world, we would have our parking study that we've been working on for the last year and a half adopted and already implemented, and I think we're getting there. What I'd like to do with this code amendment is address what I see as a critical issue for right now and for tenant, and for making sure that we're not creating hurdles for new leases. If you're adding new space, I'm trying to think of a situation where an office use of parking per 1,000 square feet and a use for a dwelling unit, those are actually pretty good. They're pretty close to each other. What I worry about is if there's existing ground floor office, which is 2.7 or 3.3 spaces per 1,000 square feet, and you go to 4 spaces required for 1,000 square feet for retail. That's where I'm worried that there is a hurdle, a perceived hurdle for someone leasing the space. Whereas if I'm reviewing an existing office and then I'm looking at the same space for a dwelling unit, I honestly would be surprised if there was more than 1 parking space different between the 2 of those. So that's more of a lateral change. It's the office to commercial change that I worry about. And it's just between 5th and 10th and just for existing buildings.
And I think that makes sense in downtown. I mean, especially the way it's what we're looking at today and the economy and all that. What if you're outside the downtown area, and I know that's what we're talking about, but let's step outside the downtown area. Let's go, say, the McLaughlin neighborhood, and you have a building that's multiple use, and during the day it's a coffee shop, and at night it's a church. Who knows? I mean, it's multiple uses, 24 hours or whatever it may be. I mean, it says in here that you have to take that into account, and it's the uses of both.
Right. There's 2 ways to look at it. Let's have a scenario where, I'll take a simpler scenario, and then we'll go to the complicated one. Ground floor retail, the second floor office, third floor dwelling. Well, when we do our parking analysis, we are really separating each use. So how many square feet is the commercial? Get the calculator out. You need X spaces. How many square foot is the office? Calculator out X spaces. And how many is the dwelling? Now, if the retail and the dwelling, or the office and the dwelling, can do a parking share agreement to really show that from 8 to 5, the dwelling space is not being used, and it can be used for office, there is a provision in our code already that allows shared parking, but the burden is on the applicant to show why those 2 uses are complementary and there's not the overlap. So you could potentially have dwelling spaces that are given up during the day for office. But that's a separate thing you're looking, if you want to go down that road, you could. If you have something where it was retail, that ground floor is retail during the day and something else at night, well, you can't double dip, and then the dwelling unit's going to have its own parking.
Okay. There's specifically the building I'm thinking of, it's retail, ground floor retail, and then apartments above. And there's already not enough parking for the apartments, so they're on the street.
And I'm sure that's a pre-existing condition.
Exactly.
Right.
So if let's say that property, the leased down below, the retail is leased, and that's leased during the day to one type of organization, at night to another type of organization.
And if this was a new construction, we would not accept that parking share agreement if they had nighttime uses in that. Usually it's it's rarely retail, but a lot of times it's office and dwelling unit where you get the parking share. Sometimes retail, but it's up to the applicant to make the proof that they really are parking share, and oftentimes it's an agreement of hours, and that the dwelling unit can't park in that space from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And so we get a little specific. I've yet, since 2004, have anybody proposed parking share? You can. I think it's complicated. That's why we haven't seen it.
Yeah. Well, it's just with the historic districts and the proximity to downtown and the McLaughlin, and then we get into mixed use.
Now, one thing with downtown is when things start changing to, if we do get housing, which is a goal for everybody, even if we get tenant improvements for changing use of existing buildings, they're going to have to look at existing lots, parking lots, and see, they're going to have to be probably buying into long-term parking spaces for those dwelling units. But you're right, that does take somebody else who was using that space for they're an office worker and they were paying for that space during the day. And I think the second phase of this is implementing our parking plan.
That's the
In
question.
a perfect world, we'd have that already up.
Right. Yeah. So nothing we do here is going to really impact the
I mean, we're just not going to have that much, but I think what the key thing for this does is when you have a prospective investor, this doesn't scare them away.
Changes to the parking plan have implications for changes to the code?
Not really. A lot of the parking plan was looking at how do you move, and I'm not the expert on the parking plan, and I think Tim was actually involved. Were you? Okay. A lot of it was how do you get people not to park right downtown if you work downtown? I mean, I try to make it simple, but that's a lot of it. And how do you play around with the meters to be a more appropriate mix? I mean, that's really the two things that we looked at. The rest of them are really just small changes. We really tried to streamline the indoor or the bicycle parking issue. And I'm available for any questions, but those were the two main issues I wanted to bring up today for off-street parking and loading. And then to dovetail 1704, we've been really trying to move all of our definitions to 1704, and we found two more, which is carpool and van pool, and that's Exhibit D, and then we moved that to the definitions chapter, and that those definitions were embedded in 1752 off-street parking and loading. So that's just a move to a different chapter.
17.52020 is now in with 030.
Is 1704.
Got it. Okay.
The last two issues I want to bring up, membrane structures, we're still working on it, so we will get back to you on membrane structures. And archaeological resources I brought up at the last meeting, and Susan White will actually be here tomorrow at the City Commission work session. She's the assistant archaeologist with the State Historic Preservation Office, and she's going to be making her presentation on that cultural, or the archaeological sensitivity map. And if the City Commission wants to move forward with that concept, which is if you fall within the identified sensitivity map, then as part of your submittal requirements for a development application, you're required to make initial contact with the State Historic Preservation Office, and then we get a letter that we check off on our application submittal. If they do want to move forward, you'll be getting the map as part of your approval, and then we will need to change a small section of our submittal requirements for both site plan and subdivision/partitions to require that letter from the State Historic Preservation Office. The map, will, just so you know, will not be available online. It's going to be a public map, so anybody can come to the planning division and ask to see it. But because it is with buffers of known and potential archaeological resources, we want to make sure that people have to kind of work to come find it, and then we know the reason why you're coming to see it, rather than if we put it on the internet, we don't know who's looking at it and what their purpose of looking at it is.
Do mining in the evening.
Yeah. So, additionally, you won't ever see it in your packet. So when you see the map come, if it comes next week or on the 9th, or 2 weeks from now or on the 9th, you'll probably just see a line item that says Exhibit X, hard copy will be available at the meeting, and we'll have a hard copy available here to look at.
All right.
I've got
Dan?
one question. Yeah, back to the parking stuff. Actually, last page, page 13, and it's the credit for pervious and low-impact development. Let me ask you.
Yeah, I apologize. I missed that. Thank you.
Yeah, because I wanted to talk a little about that, because it says you can count up to 50, and I can appreciate where you're heading with this when you have pervious pavement, that you won't need as much landscaping to for the stormwater. I get that, but what about the visual part of a parking lot where you've now taken out, you don't have to put all these trees in, and so now you just got the scar of a parking lot.
I know.
And so I'm just wondering, and it's more of a question about, is 50% the right?
You should have been there the last 2 weeks when we've been having this conversation. We've been having that exact conversation. So I'll preface it a little bit, and I'll be curious your comments. We want to be able, as part of the low-impact development kind of toolbox, pervious pavement is one option. And so those are pavers, pervious concrete, kind of that grasscrete. There's a lot of different options. So we want to find an ability to give some incentive to use it. But what would that incentive be? And one could be potentially, especially I've seen maybe in those smaller little parking lots, like where you're just pulling in and you have 4 spaces on this side, and 4 spaces on this side, or even 5 or 6 spaces. An interior tree may not be as appropriate, and maybe you can get a lot of shading from your exterior, and maybe you can make it pervious. So, I think that's the one concept that I don't think almost everyone would say, yeah, that's a good idea.
Actually, I think
then
for the small lots, I actually think that's the right way to look at it. But what about for a huge parking lot?
Right.
What does huge mean?
Well, I don't know. Just I'm just saying, if it's a little 8, 12 car sort of thing, I can see how you could reduce it down to 50% personally. But
exactly, and what we were having trouble with is what is that number of spaces? Because once you put this finite number in the code, if I happen to have a lot that's one more, or you can't get around it, and so and this is one of those trust staff, and I understand that that's a hard one. Is you can go up to 50%, and so you're still in the alternative landscape plan. You're still saying, I am requesting something different than the code. The burden of proof is on me. I still need to show how it meets the intent of the landscaping standards. I still need to show that I'm meeting my purpose of the parking lot code. And you can go to the front of the landscaping section. It talks about shading for stormwater. It talks about aesthetics. It kind of lists the top 4 or 5. So, if I'm a staff writing my staff report, I'm going back to that purpose statement to show why it's, your alternative is meeting it. And when you get past a number, I don't think you can meet it. So what we kept grappling is I had a trouble with an arbitrary number for parking spaces, but we all know it is probably somewhere in that teen number. But without actually making a hard number for it, but acknowledging that, we're talking about, if you're going to do it, and it's a very large parking lot, maybe we're only going to accept a 25% reduction. If you're starting to put, because a lot of times you have the drive aisle is normal impervious, and then the parking spaces might be pervious, which is another option. And if you're doing a whole big parking lot for that, we might not accept up to the 50%. We might, might not be able to meet that intent of the landscaping.
Okay, so it
you
sounds
got
like you
25%.
got it covered with purpose statements then.
Yeah.
When you look back at it, and there's this big parking lot, and there's hardly any trees in it, you can go back to the purpose statement and say, well, but it's not really, what you've done here hasn't accomplished that.
Yeah, I believe so, but the question is it, if there's a different plan or a different time, do they get
don't
that
know.
same intent, or
My
do we need to
concern.
add another?
If you want to be more explicit about the benefits of shading parking lots, you probably need to be more explicit about perimeter parking lot landscaping and trees. And that's what we were wrestling with. And bearing in mind that under 1762, you can count 100% of any lid vegetated landscaping that you do. So, for example, the swales out here is 1-for-1 with any percentage of landscaping on the site. But if you have this hardscape number, then, yeah, it's a tough call. I could foresee adding a table of some kind with an applicable percentage of credit based on the size of the parking lot that you're doing.
But the problem is
then
when-
the problem is,
But when you go into tables, it gets
Yeah.
so much more explicit. You almost say like, well, I get that, See, I'm in that table in this row and I'm this column, so on that many spaces, I should be able to get 35%. And you look at it and go, well, you're not really meeting the intent here. So it's always hard when you want to be explicit or you want to have it to discretion. And they can this is an alternative. We can always deny this. It's not something they get by right. But what I may make a note on and say is there a way just to beef up that purpose statement, or once again, the burden of proof is back on you, applicant.
Yeah, right.
And the neighbors. So
needs
if the
to
neighbors
provide-
go, what is this?
Yeah.
They can go back to the purpose statement and say, doesn't meet, doesn't meet, doesn't meet, doesn't meet.
Right.
And then,
Maybe you just make it more explicit by adding some language at the end of that sentence saying as stated in the purpose statement, explicitly point out that purpose statement.
and we can just quote the section, 17.52 point blah, 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 purpose.
I'd feel more comfortable doing that, and then you don't worry about what planner's looking at it, and, what planning commission is looking at that point, or whatever. Make it more clear.
Yeah. I mean, the key is the alternatives is to be very, very flexible, because you never know what's going to come out there. But to have these kind of hard bars of like, this is what we expect. Be creative, but we want you up here.
We want it to come out of these boxes.
We know what we want to do, and we know what we want it to look like, so make it happen.
And if you don't, we're going to say no, and then you go build what's allowed.
Exactly. Make it clear. Okay. Good question, Dan.
Thank you. I glossed over that section. That's all we have tonight. And we have a couple more things coming. We're almost done with really our updates. So if there's something you think we're missing, or something that's always really just kind of gnawed at you, please give us some direction, because we're kind of towards the end of the process. And I'd like to be able to, if something is added, I want to make sure that it's kind of vetted here at the Planning Commission level, rather than, ideally the City Commission knows that there's nothing new coming out that the Planning Commission hasn't seen, so.
I think we've pretty much gone over this. I'd be surprised if we find anything that we haven't talked about.
You never know. Whatever keeps you up at night.
Yeah, yeah. That doesn't. Okay. We have a crowd here. Do we have any comments from the public? Well, we'll be happy to hear them. You have to come up and speak at the... To you.
I'm sitting close enough, I think you can hear me. I only caught the last 2-3 sentences you were making.
I'm sorry, Denise?
Yes. Denise,
We're getting-
introduce yourself.
Well, 2 things. Our AV guy's given us the word that he's not picking you up on the mic, so if you just...
Sorry.
I already had my eardrums blasted out by other folks. Denise McGriff, Local Neighborhood Association, and I'm here tonight to have a discussion regarding 1750-055.
You're not getting picked up. Hold on a second. Technical difficulties. It sounds like it is. Okay, as long as he's got it now. Go ahead.
Did you get that? He's nodding. Here to just have a discussion with you regarding 1750-055. I am a little disappointed that members of the Citizen Involvement Committee aren't here because I think this is something that would be of interest to them. And I know we have a new chair, and Tom may not be aware of this. So I guess what I'm going to ask you is, you had some prior conversation about this, and you had some suggestions, which what I heard sounded really good, and I don't want to repeat that if you've already said that. So if you could sort of tell me what that was about, and then I have just some other general comments about it from experience.
That was regarding the neighborhood associations and CSA.
Yeah.
My recommendation was that we make an addition in there that says any neighborhood that is not recognized or is not currently active or does not respond, that request for a hearing or a request for a meeting would go to the CIC.
That sounds reasonable, because
The CIC could make the determination at that point, and then that land use chair, however they've got it structured, would then be able to communicate with the developer.
what I want to discuss with you is our experience with this particular section. And I'm not saying that it's in any way bad or negative. I just think that it could use some beefing up and some slight changes so that it makes it a little more equitable for the neighborhood associations. And when I say that, I'm talking about the fact that, just like you, we're all volunteers. So most of the applicants that we have had experience with, when they particularly fall into these categories of conditional use, or we haven't really had any subdivision, site plan, and design review, McLaughlin has basically made a determination that it's really unfair to the applicant to come during our regular meeting, because we have so much stuff to talk about all the time, and you want to do justice to the person and give them the benefit of presenting something to you and not in 5 minutes. I mean, even though sometimes they say, okay, you can have 5 minutes on the agenda, you guys know it's never 5 minutes. So our experience has been, we have always requested to the applicant that we hold a special meeting where they have people's undivided attention, and that's all we're talking about. It's really more fair, and for us it's more equitable. I don't know if that works for anyone else, and I'm not speaking to their experience, but for us it works because we're concentrating on that particular issue. We can focus on it. We're not looking at the clock going, oh, we've got 3 more speakers here and we need to hear everybody. So that's been our general experience, and I'd say for the most part it has worked very well. We've been able to get fairly constructive feedback without committing anything. And the reason I say that is that because it isn't a formal request for comments, we have been a little reluctant to have a vote saying, yes, we like it, or no, we don't like it. And I'm being very general. We don't really want to do that at that particular time because we found that it precludes us from coming back and saying, well, wait a minute, you didn't see this, so what about that? I mean, I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm kind of doing the what if. The other thing that is of interest to us in terms of just the applications and with all due respect to the staff, I'd say we've had most of our problems with minor site plan and design review. It seems like there's always stuff that falls through the cracks, and staff has been really, I mean, I can't say enough positive things about how helpful they have been in working with us. And I think on a couple of occasions, staff had recommended, well, why don't you talk to so-and-so who's a professional in that particular area and get their recommendation. And we were able to suggest something that was sort of a win-win for both parties, so it didn't end up being any sort of an adversarial position. But there are just little things that fall through the cracks. For example, the generator over here on this lot. Another thing that seems to fall through the cracks is building HVAC systems or anything that's going to go on top of a building. We've had 2 cases over the last 5 years where we raised a lot of ruckus about HVAC systems. And somehow or another, I think there needs to be, and staff has said that they were going to try to find a way to integrate that into. So when you're looking at a building, you should be looking at the whole building, not just these little windows. And in some cases, HVAC, in the particular instance, we had a difference in grade elevation, and you had somebody who was actually looking down on top of this stuff. And if we had seen that up front, there could have been some suggestions made about how to mitigate that instead of having to go through a lot of unnecessary, what I would call, angst. And there was angst. But staff was terrific. We just had angst about it. So those are some of those issues. I think that the other thing that we have strongly suggested to applicants, I know that there is a minimum requirement in the code for 300 feet, but believe me, when you're doing these informational meetings, that is not enough. That is just not enough distance. And we'd like to suggest that maybe for these informational meetings, that it be more than that, because people do want to know. We have found out they want to know. I have a little concern about that the meeting shall be scheduled within 30 days of the notice. So the notice, I'm flipping back and forth here, sorry. So somebody's supposed to send us a notice by certified mail with return receipt request, a letter to the chairperson describing the proposed project. So this is a letter saying, we'd like you to have a meeting, we'd like to meet with you. Is that what that's the intent of that? I mean, normally what happens, they just call us up. You know, again, I'm only speaking from McLaughlin. I don't know what happens the other. They call us up and say, hey, we'd like to get together with you. We say, hey, we've got this date. We can get a meeting this date. Was that work for you? It's great. And usually it's all worked out. We haven't had any issues about having a meeting because we want to do it. So that's a concern I have.
What's your concern?
Well, you're saying that the meeting shall be scheduled within 30 days. So if they call us up, I think by and large we've been able to be accommodating. We had one meeting which kind of came like August, September. There was vacation issues, and so we couldn't have a meeting within 30 days. But we found a date that everybody said was acceptable, and we were able to do that. So if we can't hold a meeting within 30 days for some reason beyond our control, I mean, is that like boom? They're going to say, oh, well, they didn't have a meeting, so I'm going to hold my own meeting. And I just think that puts you in sort of an adversarial sort of, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to be that. We want to be able to say, hey, we're going to give you our thoughts. I know you might not like everything, but hey, we're happy to do it.
Right. I think I understand that,
Yeah.
and I do appreciate that. I guess my concern with that would be, there's got to be a time frame, because we could shine this guy on for a long time, and I really want to try and tie it down, which is why we talked about the 30 days. Yeah. I guess to change the wording a little bit,
Well, let me ask a further question. Now, is this, they need to have the meeting if they filed for something? Because we've done a bunch of these where they haven't filed for anything, but they've still asked us to have a meeting.
They've just done that on their own.
Yeah, I mean, they were going to file, and they wanted to talk to us before they filed, and we actually like that a lot better. So is this if they file?
It's up to them. The neighborhood meeting we will not deem an application complete until the neighborhood meeting has been held. So some applicants will, schedule the neighborhood meeting, hold the meeting, incorporate the notes, then submit a land use application. Right. Other applicants will submit a land use application, and then we have 30 days to review it for completeness, and they'll have their neighborhood meeting scheduled at day 15 or something.
Well, what if we can't hold a meeting within 30 days, again, due to something beyond our control? Is that person going to be penalized, or can we say, hey, we're not going to make the 30-day deadline, but here we have a meeting date. We are going to meet.
I guess that's up to the applicant at that point. Obviously we try and we do ask them to just call the neighborhood association representative and try and schedule a meeting. The problem we've run into with other neighborhood associations is they don't respond. So then there has to be There has to be some remedy for the applicant to be able to move his application forward, or, or there's, applicants have run into, well, we can get to you in 2 or 3 months. Well, it's just not acceptable.
Sometimes you have I know there are some that only meet quarterly.
I know.
So what do you, that's not us, but what do you do?
Right, and that's why we came up with the applicant he needs to document that he's mailed a request. If the neighborhood association can't, or they only meet quarterly, then it's under the responsibility of the applicant to then mail it to, whether it be 300 feet or 500 feet of the subject site, and hold their own meeting. So we're still trying to get them to be involved with the public when there's a breakdown in the neighborhood association process, just summer vacation, it ebbs and flows. But there has to be a remedy for an applicant to move forward.
I'm just trying to figure out some middle ground so that, people aren't, because we've got all types of neighborhood association. We've got the quarterly ones, the ones that, for whatever reason, they get it, they don't, I don't know. I have to tell you, everything I get from the city, I open, so,
Let's hear what Christine's got to say.
I think we can resolve this issue just through some rewording. The first issue that Denise brought up was about the 30-day notice. I think we could add a section of, and the certified mail, or an alternative communication as approved by the neighbor association. We could add something about that. So, if I called you up instead of sending a certified mail and you were fine with the call, then that's the alternative communication. So, we can do that. But at the same time, it's that recourse. So if I can't get a hold of you, I'm the developer, I sent my certified, I've done my due diligence, no one's calling me back, I can kind of check my boxes and says, listen, I've done everything I was asked to do, I'm not getting a response, I'm going to hold my meeting. The second one...
Before you go to the second one, because again, I'm trying to put on, if I was on CIC and I'm trying to think of other neighborhood situations that aren't the same as ours, could we try to, accommodate, and that's what you're trying to do, so they could call, I've gotten calls, I've gotten an email, I've gotten a call and an email, and then we set a date, and we're kind of just calling back and forth, but let's say, they call, they email, if the person has an email, and then the next thing is, because getting a certified letter, people don't need to get heart attacks, but usually if you get a certified letter, it's not ever really good. At least the ones I've gotten, they're never that good. Now, if I got one that was a check, that'd be great, but you don't know that. So just to try to give a little more leeway to those neighborhood associations that are not quite, because they kind of go, I'm getting some from the city, they don't open. We tell them at CIC, when I've gone to CIC, I say, look, if you get some from the city, open it. Don't put it in the, I'll look at it later pile. It might be something important. So just maybe a little leeway.
Can it say something like it's within 30 days or by mutual agreement by both the applicant and the neighborhood association? Because you may mutually come, it's going to be in the 45th day. You finally figured it all out, and it was,
They're gone, we're gone, we can't find a place to meet, or,
but both have to agree to it.
And if you're an applicant and you're asked to wait 15 more days, you're going to wait 15 more days. The last thing you want to do is, make the neighborhood association, start the meeting on a bad footing because you've we're trying to stick it to them. So
that's pretty good. You tell them, hey, you need to get a hold of this person or this person.
So
and that's worked really.
Right, but we want to write code for the worst case scenario.
Right. Yeah. And
I
don't know who those are.
And it'll happen in the next 5 to 8 years. We'll get it where the developer can't get a hold of anybody. It's tried. A neighborhood that used to be active is no longer active, that imploded, and what do I do? So we have to have something in the code to say, this is what you do. So I think I can add those two things, which is the mutual agreeable and then or alternative communication as approved by the neighborhood. I think we can. I don't think the intent of the code changes by adding those two sections.
From my perspective on the Planning Commission, I just want to know that the effort was made, that the process was followed, and I don't care if you vote. I don't care if you vote. I just want
we had a discussion.
I want to know that you had the discussion, and you can come back to a public hearing and you can talk all you want, and I'll feel how you voted there. I don't care that there's a vote. So that's really all I'm interested in. And
I think that's kind of what we feel as well. And, we want to, like I said, by and large, we have had really great experiences. I will give you a little example where we went the extra mile and we actually put a notice about one of these meetings in our newsletter. Then we had people showing up saying, well, I didn't see it. And then, what do you say? He said, hey, look, we told them that we would put a notice in our newspaper. And that went to everybody. So so our chair asked the question, well, do you not read the neighborhood newsletter? And yeah, we were all kind of looking at our shoelaces. And the guy said, well, no. And somebody else piped up, well, maybe next time you will read it. So he was trying to grouse on the applicant for not sending him a personal notice. They actually did. They put a notice on their door, and they saw that. But the newsletter had come out the week before saying, it had, all kinds of stars and bells and whistles saying, we're having a special meeting regarding this issue. If you want to come and talk about this, come on down. And we had more applicant members there than we had neighborhood members. And, what do you do?
Let's talk about the 300 feet issue. Is there any legal definition? Is that 300 feet?
Yeah, I've always wanted to know where it comes from because, City of Portland's 300 feet. It seems like any jurisdiction I've worked in.
That's for official public hearing, but I'm saying since this isn't really an official public hearing, could we make it bigger?
I always thought it was
ORS 197763 provides for the 300 feet for a notice for a quasi-judicial hearing. So it could be, you can make it bigger. You can make it bigger or smaller. This isn't the official notice of a hearing. This is the notice of a neighborhood meeting. So it could be whatever you want.
And I guess I'd like to distinguish between the two. One is what we're requiring the applicant to do prior to submittal. The other one is what we're required to do for a public notice for an actual land use application or hearing. I would prefer that you not expand the public hearing for what the city, we've got our hands full as it is, mailing for 300 feet. So just, if you want to stick it on the applicant to go 500 feet or 7, that's fine because they're paying for it and they're doing the mailing and they're putting together the brochures and whatnot. That would be an additional expense for the city.
The problem will come, though, what if the applicant does it wrong and they miss somebody? But the 300 number has very specific remedies about how you correct it. In this case, the pre-application meeting is a application requirement, not an approval criteria, correct? So if I just want to be really clear, if the applicant screws that up and misses somebody, that wouldn't, I don't think, be a basis for denial.
No.
Of an application because it's not an approval criteria and it's not a statutorily required notice.
I'm just saying that in case of this sort of informational thing, the more people that are informed, again, whether they read it or not, at least we can say, hey, this person went out at least 500 feet, all around the perimeter of the site to try to make sure people knew what was going on. And, we can't make you come. You can't, it's the whole horse in the water trough thing. We did it, and if you didn't get anything, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. So you can get it out there, and we can justify that in order to support the applicant and say, look, they tried. I'm sorry if you either didn't read it, didn't concern yourself with it, so don't come back and complain to us when you say you don't know what's going on.
But that happens at the 300 feet.
Oh, I know.
Yes.
I just have a question. So if they screw up they don't get it out to if we expanded to 500 feet, would that not jeopardize the actual application, which would be a basis for denial if you didn't have a complete application?
No, because there's a difference between having a complete application and then application of the approval criteria. For example, there's an approval criteria that says thou shalt have a mitigation plan for a water quality area. If I submit an application and it doesn't have that plan in there, and Tony doesn't pick it up as part of his completeness review, I haven't met the criteria, right? But if there's an application requirement that says you shall have a neighborhood plan, but there's no approval criteria that says if you didn't have a neighborhood plan, your application's denied. The fact that you didn't have all the proper notice as part of your neighborhood meeting doesn't mean that the application's denied. The only thing that would worry me about this whole changing the notice thing is just inconsistent. I mean, it puts a burden on staff to check what is 500 feet and then what is 300 feet. If it's all 300 feet, then it's always 300 feet, and there's no dispute about whether it's 300 or 500.
And why did I receive it at 500? Why did I receive this and then I didn't receive the land?
Get it, it was 300.
Why 500?
I totally get it, but we've asked everybody that's ever come before us, we've asked them, you know, looking at where it is, you might want to go out farther than that, just as a courtesy, we've asked them. I mean, you could say at least.
The neighborhood association's going to be informed by the applicant that something's going on, and the applicant's going to... And at some point, the neighborhood association's going to take the responsibility to let people in the neighborhood know that something's going on. So people are going to get noticed 3 different ways.
Our newsletter only comes out every other month, so.
I think we can easily add a minimum of 300 feet.
At least, or...
But I really do worry. I mean, you know, I got this, I got this note from a developer, but I never got the land use. I wanted to comment, even though I drive down the street and there's a land use sign there. But you know, we hope.
Well, I just wanted to.
We hope that the catch-all of the land use sign gets the people that are at 300, 400, 400, 500, 600 feet that are, you know, still potentially affected, but not so adjacent that they see the blue land use sign. So we try to get you through all different ways.
It sounds to me like at least, or however you want to position that was going to work.
I'm not falling on my sword. I'm just saying that this has been something that's been brought up continually.
Well, I think you're doing the right thing by talking to the developer and saying you ought to think about going a little bit further out.
And we always do. We say, you know, it would be better if you just went out a little further. The idea, you know, we always try to find a place that's, you know, within the neighborhood area, particularly if it's, you know, something up in Buena Vista or if it's at the edge over by Ely. We usually try to find a place to meet that's kind of near there, so you're there and you can walk out and go, oh yeah, there it is. That's real helpful. So that's always been. So
You have other concerns?
yes, while you're on the topic of the blue signs, a pet peeve of mine and other people in our neighborhood is that we understand that you guys have limited time. But to take the notice, which isn't nearly this big, but something that might be this small, and paste it on the blue sign, which you can see the blue sign when you drive by, but you can't see what's on it. And sometimes they're in places where you cannot pull over to see what it says. And I would just like to just bring it up that maybe we think about an alternative way of, you know, if it said big letters, conditional use permit, you know, such and such, that might be helpful so you could actually see it when you're going 25 miles an hour, as most of us all drive around town.
How about a
number?
website and then a file number under it?
Sure. That would be helpful, but something that's
I don't know, is
that's
that
big,
feasible?
It's just magic markers.
I don't.
Say we're running into we've got ORS noticing requirements for print that has to be on there. We have commissioners who would like it explicitly stated how a neighborhood association gets a free appeal.
On the notice?
Yes. We have a lot of information we need to put on there. You know, if it can be limited to conditional use, I guess we'd like to kind of think about this.
I'm just saying, just think about it. Like I'm saying,
Yep.
this is on the street right away. You're driving by in a car. It isn't red. Can you see this? No, you can't.
Right, and I guess, you know, at some point, someone has to take some responsibility of, you can call the city and say, I was on Jackson Street, can you tell me what that's about? You get out of your car and you walk back. You go to the city's website. You know, there's lots and lots of alternatives. And I guess we can certainly try and come up with something, you know, it's a conditional use permit, it's a subdivision, it's a site plan design review. Now, is that enough information?
I think enough is a file number across the top.
And I guess, just put like SP 1015 or whatever.
1015, exactly.
Yeah.
So you know something.
Okay.
Because they are helpful. The ones, I will say that the ones at the City of West Lynn, ours are better than theirs. Theirs are really small.
Okay.
Even the sign is small. I mean, you cannot see what it says. And again, some of the places where we have applications, they may or may not be pedestrian friendly, so you might not be walking by it. You're inevitably going to be driving by it. Now, only crazy people like me find a place to pull over, walk back, and look at it because we're nuts. So,
But I do get quite a lot of, I was driving down Jackson Street and I saw a blue sign and I'll, and we often say, we'll talk to them over the phone about it. And that's not uncommon to get those phone calls.
Well, that's great.
and then just lastly, on that same particular section, I think our group will endeavor to try to put together some brief notes. We had a situation occurred where somebody took notes at a meeting that didn't really know, they really, to be honest with you, they didn't really know what we were talking about, and they did the best job they could. We got a copy of the notes, sent back, this is not really what happened, and we didn't really want to spend the time going back and forth, so they just submitted them to the city the way they were. We didn't really agree with what they said because the person, like I said, unfortunately, was just taking the notes and didn't really get the gist of what we were going on. So we had a little disagreement about, well, the notes that you submitted as part of your application, that really didn't reflect what happened at the meeting. So as long as we have the option of working with them to say, gee, that really wasn't quite right, we think this happened instead, we just want to make sure we have that opportunity to do that. Most times they don't take copious notes. We usually take notes and give them to them and say, here, put down we try to do bullet points. We don't want to get into he said, she said, but that's all we do. We just do bullet points. Here were the main points. Here's who was here. This is when we had it. Here's the different issues that happened, and that's all we agreed to meet again or something to that effect. That's all we've done. Okay. That's it. And I will see if I can get a hold of somebody from CIC to follow up on this.
Okay. Well,
Thank you very much.
you're going to the CIC meeting, I know, and if they would like to speak more about it, I'll be happy to talk with them as well, or
You're going to be there?
staff will. I'm going to try to be.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. That sounds great. Thank
Okay.
you for
Oh, sorry.
getting that. And I did get when I got it, I opened it up, I looked at it, I read it, and then I thought about it. So thank you. Appreciate
Tina,
it.
you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd like to comment to one thing brought up by Ms. McGriff, just because we're here. She did bring up potentially having notice to minor site plans. And while I absolutely understand, I'd like to respectfully disagree with that, and I would like to give some background of why. We've made kind of a commitment on the city level that minor site plans don't require a pre-application conference on the city level because they are so small, and that we get out the decision within 30 days of completeness. And so I think if we moved for a neighborhood association meeting, we'd have to revisit those general goals by the city to address small exterior changes, which is often minor site plan or little small additions. And so that's really the only comment I wanted to give on that one. There's a reason why we've chosen. Yeah, I mean,
It's like
yeah, I think and this is the problem is, the minor site plans that I've dealt with either on Main Street or in McLaughlin, I've highly recommended that the applicant contact Denise that are in McLaughlin, and hopefully some of them have. So whereas, if we're on Malala Avenue and you're doing a 100-square-foot addition to the subway, I'm just making up an example, that's a little bit different for getting Gaffney Lane to get a neighborhood association meeting for that. And I don't want in the code to spell out a specific neighborhood association gets a different noticing requirement. So at this level, I'd still like to continue doing what I have been doing, which is highly, highly recommending that the applicant meet with the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association nonetheless. But I just don't feel like it should be codified at this point.
That was a brand new one. We did that coffee building that didn't ever get built. Oh, okay, that was conditional use. Okay, that's completely different then. Okay.
And if I can, I can point out, just to refresh everybody, for minor site plans, per the code, a minor site plan applies, one, a modification to an office, commercial, industrial, institutional, public, or multifamily structure for the purpose of enhancing the aesthetics of the building and not increasing the interior usable space. For example, covered walkways or entryways, addition of unoccupied features such as a clock tower. Second time it can be used. A maximum addition of up to 1,000 square feet to a commercial, office, institutional, public, multifamily, or industrial building, provided that the addition is not more than 35% of the original building square footage. And then 3 other land uses and activities may be added to the community by the community development director. If the community development director makes written findings that the activity use will not increase offsite impacts and is consistent with the type and/or scale of activities uses listed above. So it's very restricted when we actually get to use the minor site plan. And part of that was to speed up the process for, 500 square foot additions to a commercial building that's going in the back so they can put a fridge in. And then we needed to create a separate process to address the fees. So there was a reduction in fees. It was very difficult to justify charging our full site plan design review fee for something as minor as that. So that was kind of how it started and where it came from. And so then, this discussion about, should it be required to go in front of the neighborhood association as part of the completeness review? That's certainly up to you to decide. I'm just trying to think, what else do we exempt from requiring?
We used to exempt smaller new construction, and in this last go-around, we basically just said, if it's new construction, you're going in, because a lot of things were at that, we had 10,000 square feet, and they were like 9,000. They were still pretty big, and so for this latest version, we're just excluding minor site plan. But let me just verify that.
I believe we exempt partitions.
Oh, yeah.
So it's, these smaller type of land, and you were asking for an example of...
Well, no, I can give you one. If we had had a neighborhood meeting for this building, we could have headed some stuff off at the pass. The person that Christina talked to did not contact us. I contacted them when I didn't hear back from them. I think I made half a dozen calls. They never returned any of my calls. And it was really unfortunate, but we could have had a more collaborative process. And I don't want to bring, dish any dirt, but again, it could have been a better and more collaborative process instead of what we ended up having. And I'm talking about the initial developer, not after the parking lot and all that. That was very collaborative. But it was the case of somebody who was redeveloping this building under the guise of a minor site plan and design review, so they just blew us off. And I don't really think that we want to have any more of those. And again, it's a fine line between, minor site plan and design review and kind of everything that they did to this particular building. It probably should have been design review, but again, that's a judgment call, and I respect your guys' judgment. But in hindsight, hindsight is always the best one. You can go, ooh. So that's the one I'm talking about that could have been so much better. Could have been so much better, and it just wasn't.
I guess obviously, as the commission, you have. We can create the code however you think it's necessary, and the question comes down to should everything because we've kind of already created this subcategory, this minor site plan, so now I don't think it's appropriate to kind of make another subcategory of minor site plan. I mean, either it should go or it shouldn't, and that's up for you. And you've heard the concerns, and we'll do whatever you need.
If they don't listen to staff, you tell them, we're going to send you to a public meeting. A little coercive suggestions don't hurt. You can kind of
type 3 if you don't agree with
hey, you don't want to meet with the neighbor? Oh, that's too bad.
I'd like to give that some more thought.
I say that to them sometimes. I instead, she doesn't say. I said, well, gee, I understand that if you don't get a hold of us, then gee, the staff's not going to be really happy. You want the staff to be happy, don't you? So that's kind of how I say it.
I say the same thing the other way around.
Do you? Oh, okay. Well, see, there you go. We got a mutual thing going on. So that's what I tell them. They go, oh, really? Oh, yeah. Oh, man. We'll be the good
Okay.
cop. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else at this point? Anything for the commission? I would like to congratulate Tony on your new position. You deserve it. You're a hard worker and very strong background, and it's been a pleasure to work with you, and now it'll be even more of a pleasure to work with you.
Please try to have fun, because now you get all the headaches, but not as much of the fun.
Yep. No, and thank you. It's been a pleasure working with this
Enjoy that
commission.
stress.
Yes, I will. Development applications are still very, very slow, as I'm sure everyone's aware with the economy. We're going through and updating all of our numbers for applications for 2009, and we'll get that to you probably next hearing. I think one of the we brought in subdivisions in 2009 that if they were to go through and be platted was a total of 10 or 12? 10 new lots, which is something it's not on any of the charts going back to, I think we've got data going back to 2002, 2003 or so. 12 pre-apps in the year of 2009. We're usually up in the 60 to 100 range. So, it's been hit, Oregon City's been hit hard. So we haven't seen any applications coming in yet. There's been quite a few, a lot of phone calls, folks starting to come back into the counter and start asking about properties. But they're probably, it's going to take a little while still before we start seeing some development coming in. You're seeing a lot of these minor site plans or additions to existing buildings. And so you're seeing a lot of kind of investment in the existing structure that's there rather than new buildings going up.
Can you give a quick update on the rivers and the cove, as far as you can go?
The Cove, I believe that we are in the process of closing the property purchase and sales that were necessary in order to complete that project. So hopefully, those will close the next couple days here. And then I think the next step would be to start we approve phases 1 and 2 for the detailed development plan, which would be the site prep, the mass grading. And then hopefully here in the next couple of months, we'd get an application in to start phase 3, which would be the apartments and maybe potentially the office at a later date. But we imagine the first thing that come in would be the apartment site plan design review for that application. The rivers, there's been some preliminary discussions with Senator Callaghan, but there isn't any follow-up that I'm aware of as to any type of a timeline or even a design that's been nailed down. That we've seen some preliminary designs, but there were, I think, 4 or 5 different options. So I think we're still working with what that layout's going to look like if we do move forward.
So right now it's a non-issue.
It's a non-issue. They haven't even come in for a pre-app yet at this point. I know there's, like I said, still pretty preliminary discussions going on. I think one application you're going to see probably in the near future is the Housing Authority property up there in Park Place. They're probably going to be coming in for a master plan, redevelop. I believe it's about 20 acres. So we'll be hopefully seeing that. I believe they need a local land use approval mid-fall in order to try and secure some federal money in order to complete the redevelopment of that site. I know they've been doing a lot of work out in the community, trying to meet with Park Place Neighborhood Association and other interested groups on some of their preliminary work and design and thoughts about what folks would like to see up there.
I've attended their public meetings. And they do have a website out there where they're talking about their process and I think some ideas.
All right, very good.
Those are really the three big potential developments that we might see something moving forward for the end, last 6 months of the 2009 fiscal year moving into 2010.
And then the last question I had, just for as an update, but the jug handle, I mean, my understanding was it was shovel-ready for the most part, right? I mean, did Nancy get funding for it from the Obama
I don't think it's
program?
Do you know, Laura, if it's been finalized? I mean, I know it's about 95%, but I don't think the actual allocation of the funds has been approved by Congress.
Check yet.
I haven't signed the check.
Okay. Well, that's why I wanted
But a lot of works, I mean, like I said, I know that a lot of the engineering plans are well along their way.
Well, it's Nancy. I'm impressed that she was prepared to be able to present that as the wall promenade and some of the other things.
Warner Milne.
Yeah, that seems like a long time to get that thing done, isn't it? For such a short.
We have the project manager right over here, Chris Butler, who could probably give you an
What's up
update.
with that? I haven't seen you out there.
Uh-oh, busted. For the promenade or the Warner
No.
Milne?
The Warner Milne.
Yeah, that'll go for a few more months into the beginning of the summer. So they're replacing all those utilities at Warner Milne.
Oh, okay.
So-
That's the holdup.
And then realigning that intersection
Yeah.
at Malala and Warner Milne as well. So it'll be a while more.
All right. Great. Well, that's fine then.
What is the status of the Public Works upgrade?
Notice of decision, so the city commission denied the appeal by a vote of 3-2 and upheld the planning commission's decision with some minor tweaks to the conditions of approval. The notice of decision was mailed out last Friday, so there's 21 days from last Friday to submit an appeal to LUBA. If no appeal is submitted, that's the final decision. The city commission decided to reject the requested adjustment to the height for the office building on Center Street, but said that it's not necessarily a denial of a larger building. It's just they wanted to see multiple design options before they agreed to an adjustment. So we probably envision, if we come in with a building at a later date, it would be part of an adjustment, would be included in the design of that building. The request to exempt the upper site from Historic Review Board review was rejected. So all development and demolition of buildings and construction in new buildings on the anywhere would need to go in front of Historic Review Board. There was a condition added about remember the basalt outcropping up on top, that an alternative site plan be submitted. Public Works was proposing to remove that entire basalt outcropping to be able to access the bins up there. They're going to need to submit an alternative design that looks at keeping all or part of that basalt, and as part of that, they'd be showing backing distances and turning radiuses and make sure it's safe. If we can preserve part or all, that'll be determined during the detailed development plan. So those were the major changes associated with the approval from the commission.
So before you go, if you want to have a motion to continue to the January 25th, 2009 Planning Commission hearing.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded.
All right. Commissioner Stein?
Aye.
Commissioner Groner?
Aye.
Commissioner Lajoie?
Aye.
Chair Powell?
Aye.
All right, approved.
Thank you very much. So if there's nothing else, then we are adjourned this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.